Hey guys, Ricky Howard here, and this week's edition of the DoD Contract Academy features John Ferry. He's the co-founder of Use Rogue, which is a AI platform that helps you write proposals. And it really caught my eye because, as you know, if you're in this space, if you're going after government contracts, how much time do you spend writing requests for information, sources sought, responding to RFPs and RFQs? That is a extremely time-consuming process. And even if you're not the one that's writing the proposals, if you're paying someone to do that, all of a sudden, your account executive, if he has to write a proposal, he's not looking for leads or following up with leads. That proposal, depending on how big it is, could take a long time. And this is a way to potentially reduce that timeline significantly. So I think you're really going to find it interesting how John came up with this. So again, should be a really interesting conversation. I know it is because I've already had it with him. So right now, check out my interview with John Ferry. Well, hey everyone, Ricky Howard here with the DoD Contract Academy podcast. And today I have John Ferry. John, how's it going today?
Good. Richard, how are you?
Can't complain. So I first found out about you on LinkedIn. I was actually making a post for one of our podcast episodes, and then I saw you in some of the banter back and forth and some people talking about you, and I looked at your company, which I believe you co-own, called Rogue, and what you were doing. And in fact, the last episode, people may remember we were talking about using AI for another software tool, but you, if I have it correctly, Rogue has a platform that uses AI to help write proposals for government contracts. Is that somewhat accurate?
100%. That is exactly what it's designed to do. We're trying to take kind of the magic of generative AI that everyone's really kind of coming to grips with right now and just hyper focus it on the most painful parts of kind of the bid proposal capture process.
That's awesome. And I think I'm going to be using it soon too. I think all of us in the public sector, whether we're in sales or BD or business owners, whatever. Yes, that proposal writing process. I don't know if this applies to other things like RFIs and whatnot yet, but sources sought. But anything that can help with some of that, I think it would be really interesting. But before we get into that, that's what I'm sure everyone's waiting to hear about. Let's learn a little bit about you. So if you could tell me a little bit about where you're from and where you went to school, and then kind of how you got to the point where you had this brilliant idea of putting a tool like this together.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. So a little bit about me. So I joined the Army, National Guard, straight out of high school, went the 18 X-ray program. So went straight into Army Special Forces, graduated from that. And then my government contracting career kind of started initially supporting rapid acquisition. So about 15 years ago now, back during Iraq and Afghanistan wars, I started working at the Joint ID Defeat Organization. So I did a bunch of rapid acquisition work there. Moved from that into the Pentagon, did some budgeting and program objective memorandum, right? Building budgets. And then from there, I actually moved over and started supporting DARPA. So I spent about 8 years doing technology transition at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is kind of where AI actually started back in the day. And so about 3 years ago, I bought the government contracting company that I worked for, very small, kind of niche professional services business. I bought it about 6 months before COVID started. And when COVID hit, everything shut down. A lot of my folks went on distance work. And so after I took over the company, I started building out a digital development side of the company. And from that, we won a challenge in partnership with the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, CDAO, to build a AI-powered contract writing system, right? So kind of a government side of this equation. And as we were building that out, it really kind of intuitive. You can solve the government side of the problem and help government push out solicitations and announcements much faster. That is a huge problem on the government side. But if you're only optimizing the government side of the problem, you're only solving half of the problem. So we spun out a completely separate company, set up the platform, which is userogue.com, which you mentioned, and it is hyper focused on building government proposals. So,
Okay.
and kind of, from our small business pedigree, our kind of ethos is trying to give the same capability, kind of trying to give a leg up to those small, disadvantaged, non-traditional, the folks who are trying to break into that GovCon market, who can't necessarily afford a full stack proposal shop, who are desperately trying to push out, SBIR proposals, OTA proposals, the smaller like task order. They're trying to get in their foot in the door with a bunch of RFI responses. It is a time consuming process for those small businesses. So we focused on that as really our initial key user community. And we built a platform around that pain point. And that's where we are today.
Okay. That's really interesting. So this is really two stories, right? So this is not just a podcast then about an awesome tool that people can use to save them some time. This is also, you fall right in line with what a lot of the companies that I've interviewed on here, I guess would fall under, which is you have a business that is sold to the government and started selling. Can we go back to where you said you purchased a government contract services company? Is that what you said? What was the impetus for that? Or maybe I should ask, what was their specialty? What services were you focused on at that point?
Yeah, great question. So that company, Trench and Analytics, we go by TAC, was really focused on very high end professional services. So like science, engineering, technical assistance, CETA type support to folks like DARPA, um, Team Submarine in the Navy. We did some work for ONR. So really focusing on S&T organizations.
Okay.
Uh, we've since expanded a little bit into more general professional services, budget, finance,
Yeah.
admin, project management. But when I bought the company with my wife, we were about 12 people.
Hmm.
And, over the last 3 years, we've been fortunate and grown about 3x.
That's
But
awesome.
I totally identify with that small business, environment where it is your time, sweat, blood, sweat, and tears that you really have to lay on the line to make those advancements.
Yeah. And it sounds like, and I don't know what your background is as far as developing software, but I would say it's a pretty significant pivot from providing, warm bodies and seats, right? Which is what you're, I think what you're telling me, right? So like the CETA and the different support contractors. So you were providing people. You're basically giving people jobs and providing them to the government, right? Like, hey, I want to hire. I did it in the Air Force. I need to hire 5 cyber engineers to do X. And so you might provide, or program managers, right? So your company could provide those program managers year over year doing that type of work, which can be competitive, but it's definitely a big need in many areas, right? But then you pivoted, or you started this development part of your company. How did that come to be? Did you have that special skill set yourself? Is that just somebody that you knew? Maybe that's your partner that you teamed up with. How did that go down?
No, so we actually started with small business innovative research programs.
Okay.
So when we took over the company, what I did, my specialty supporting DARPA as a support contractor, was technology transition. So trying
Mhm.
to bridge the quote unquote valley of death of getting
Mhm.
things out of DARPA and into operational users' hands. And I specialized in the special operations community
Right.
specifically. And so when I took over the company, what the strategy was to build out capabilities on the sort of digital development side and try to dovetail those with professional services. So can we
Okay.
do things that are AI related so we get past performance and get some chops in that realm and potentially sort of co-sell those things to potential customers, right? Try to tie into the professional services side with the digital development side and try to tie the digital development in with our professional services. So theoretically, if I wanted to branch out from providing program management support to DARPA, maybe I wanted to move into some of the like the code camps and the folks in the Air Force that are doing sort of on task development work. I
Hmm.
could build up some professional, some background in doing it on a cyber side and then pivot and sell that on the professional services side. It
Okay.
was kind of a strategy. We had actually pretty good success in
Yeah.
just building out that digital development side of the company, and so now we kind of operate those two somewhat independently because they're both fairly successful.
Oh, good. Good. Well, it's awesome. And then, I guess you can never predict what's going to happen, right? And you were successful, obviously, with what your initial strategy was. But I guess in the process of that, in the process of winning, I think it was a SIBR, right, with to do the contracting side of AI. Or I guess I imagine this would be AI to help contracting officers and government acquisitions agencies write contracts from the government standpoint. Is that accurate?
That's that's correct, and it was other transaction agreement, so
Okay.
similar to
Okay.
SBIR. But yeah, it's we built out a platform. It's actually accessible for government folks. It's called ACBOT,
Mhm.
ACQBOT.com under CDAO. And exactly, it really what we're looking to do there is kind of automate or semi-automate and bring like large language models and graph databases to the sort of end-to-end acquisition process. And
Sure.
that's being very successful also because there's a huge need there.
Oh, it's I mean, it's something we've talked about on the podcast a lot, which is the heavy lift, the huge lift from the government, to actually put something like a solicitation out there. I think a lot of, we talk a lot about influencing requirements on the show and finding opportunities ahead of the solicitation, and um, some are often surprised to find out that the government team doesn't necessarily know all of the requirements that need to go into a solicitation. It could be like when I was a new program manager, I just had been flying for 10 years, and they handed me insider threat and some other things like that to tackle, and that that requires a completely different skill set and research, talking to businesses and talking to engineers, and trying to figure out basically the cybersecurity answer, which I think we're still trying to figure out, right? But that tool for the government would be huge, because that does eliminate a lot of the burden. And that brings us to, I guess, where we are now with Rogue, which is, if I'm repeating it back correctly, is that the government said, "Hey, you've got," or maybe you thought of this yourself, which was, "Hey, we're solving the government problem. There's a big industry need," which you are obviously familiar with yourself. Let's see if we can tackle that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's kind of where we started. Um, Candidly, the actual genius of this idea came like 2 or 3 years ago. We actually I pitched this as a phase one feasibility study like 2 years ago to an
Mhm.
SBIR open topic, and nobody really picked it up. But it wasn't, AI and the appreciation of AI has really matured, I would say, over the last 2 years. And
Yeah.
when ChatGPT came to fore, everybody kind of got the appreciation of really what the power was. So yeah, we built Rogue. It's functional, right? You can go sign up for it, and I would say the core feature and the value add that I take on a regular basis, because I'm in the same boat, right? I have to push out RFI responses, sources saw responses, and proposal responses on a regular basis. Is you can kind of go and log in. There's a kind of a quick start guide. You can go from the description of a requirement, and SBIRs are a great example, right? You go to an SBIR, there's the description of what they're looking for,
Mhm.
and the SBIR format is fairly consistent, right? It's like 12 sections. And for a phase one, it's about 5 pages. For a phase two, it's somewhere between 25 and 50 usually. And so what you can do in Rogue is go in, start a new proposal, take the description of the requirement, paste that in, and take basically the table of contents, the sections you need to fill, paste that in, hit generate, and it will take you from those two pieces of content to a fully built out draft. That's about 3 to 5 pages, depending on what you start with.
Okay.
And so it's not going to write the proposal for you. What it does do is it does that initial 2, 3, 4 hours of work of trying to, like, you got to pull the outline out of the BAA. You have to take what they're asking for, kind of parse all of that, specific requirements out, all the shall statements, if you will, and
Right.
then start crafting up how you would answer those shall statements. It just does that in about 10 seconds.
Oh,
And
wow.
then once you're in the once you have that initial outline, We have some what we call AI magic tools, like there's an expanding tool. So you can select a sentence of text, hit expand, and turn a sentence into a paragraph, or turn a paragraph into a page.
Okay.
And the way I look at that is, if you tell me, hey, I need you to do X, right?
Mhm.
You give me a problem and I know how to solve that problem. I can generally articulate how I would solve that problem in about 5 to 10 seconds, right? If I'm worth my salt. And just about any other developer can, any other professional services company can tell you how they're going to solve your problem.
Right.
Otherwise, they shouldn't be in the game. The challenge and the manual effort, the lower value manual effort, is taking that elevator pitch from a couple of sentences to the 5, 10, 15, 20 pages that the government legitimately requires you to put into your proposal.
Right.
And so that expansion tool, I can write down the 2, 3, 4 sentences, the 5 bullets of how I would solve the problem, how I would approach the problem, which is
Mhm.
unique to me. That's where I encapsulate my solution. I can hit the expansion tool and it will parse and expand that into, every sentence becomes a paragraph. Now you've turned a quarter of a page into 3 or 4 pages. When I'm trying to, churn out RFI responses, and I'm, trying to kind of put the same content on multiple pages, it makes things go so much faster. And it allows you to focus on the high value tasks that are really exquisite to you, right?
Right.
And it allows the computer to take over the, explaining what zero trust is and putting it in the context of the document, explaining what cloud computing is, or, multi-tenancy is, right? You can write that, or you can copy and paste that, or you can have the generative AI create that organically.
Right.
And with that, we've got a concising tool. So if you've got, overly bulky text, or you're trying desperately to get under page count, which is something
Mhm.
we've all experienced, you can select a fairly large piece of content, hit concise, and it will keep the key facets of that content and just cut out all the extraneous content. And so
Interesting.
really quickly allows you to go from a lot to a little and get under page count. And there's also a paraphrasing tool. So similarly, select it on the interface, hit paraphrase, and you can take a piece of content that might be overly jargony, dense, doesn't have kind of the one voice with the rest of the document, and it'll convert that into kind of the same amount of text, but it's more consistent and it's more readable with the rest of the document.
Okay.
We also built in a chat interface. So from our opinion, there's a lot of chats going on. Everybody's taking Chat GPT and making a new chat for a niche use case.
Mhm.
We put a chat in there. We actually made it useful, and we enabled a feature where you can index that chat off of your internal content. So I've written a bunch of responses and proposals. I've got, resumes, past performance, things like that built in to Rogue at this point, because I've been using it for a couple of months. I toggle the index switch, and I can ask it to, write me a technical approach to a modular systems architecture for, data transforms. And it will index off of the content I've already written. So it's
Oh,
contextualized
interesting.
to, yeah, right. It's kind of the same thing you would do trying to take your shelfware, right, and rewrite
Mhm.
it for the new proposal.
Yeah.
Will take your shelfware and it will take the proposal you're writing, and it will create a new organic piece of content that's contextually accurate for both of those things. So a
Interesting.
lot of that rewriting stuff that you spend a lot of time doing does it automatically.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, and then there's also kind of a fun feature we call snippets, where if you have shelfware that you like to reuse on a regular basis, maybe it's a resume, a technical approach, right? The reusable content you use regularly, you basically save that in a shelf
Mhm.
in the writing workflow, and you can just drop that in. And you can drop it in and expand it. You could drop it in and paraphrase it. You could drop it in and concise it. So using those tools together, I've written a bunch of proposals. Things that used to take me 2 weeks or a month now take me a few hours.
Yeah.
And
And
so for a small business who's trying to, like, you know, expand my opportunity space, it's huge, right?
yeah, it's not only does it save you time, it enables you to go after a lot more opportunities if that's what you want to do. I mean, that's you got to take shots on goal, right? What about security, right? So I'm a small business. Maybe I'm not a small business, right? And I have some proprietary stuff. maybe it's not even proprietary, but is this, but I don't want it to go into like the collective where it's,
Right.
where it's being, you know, because the way, and I probably have a very poor man's understanding of Chat GPT in some of the AI, but I've used it quite a bit. And so I know that Chat GPT is certainly not perfect. And it also, it seems to take from things that it finds on the internet, right? So like, I don't know if we can have 100% confidence if I'm using a tool like that, that I have original content in front of me now that isn't. What do you have in place at Rogue that I guess A prevents what I put in there from being known to anybody else, and B, like how much of it when it's auto generating stuff or expanding, am I spending a lot of time going through it to make sure that I'm not plagiarizing somebody, or what's the, can you
Yeah,
go
this
explain that a
is
little bit?
probably the most consistent question we get, right? And it's the two versions of that question is, how do I write the same proposal for the same topic without having exactly the same proposal as somebody else who used your tool for the same topic, right? That's
Mhm.
one. And the other one is, we know that LLMs, large language models, ChatGPT, right? They learn, right? So if I put anything into that, I'm, kind of indirectly benefiting everybody else who uses it. And so we solved that problem very much from the front end. Essentially, the way to think about it is there's the model that does the generation, that does the creating of new text. And that's, it's trained like everything else. It's tuned to our use cases. So it is built, or it is narrowed such that it writes really good proposal language,
Mhm.
unlike ChatGPT that just
Sure.
writes half decent English papers. So there's that piece that's kind of the engine that does the writing, but where it draws from is the most important part. So think of it in the sense that everyone uses the same engine to get the outputs out, but you have a secure and private unstructured database that all of your content goes into. So if you
Okay.
copy in any content from previous proposals or any of the generation, any of the writing you do within, it is encapsulated within your organization's private unstructured database. And so any of the feedstock that you would use to do your unique generations are private to you. And the model itself doesn't learn, right? It's already been trained, so it's not going to learn new tricks.
Mhm.
Uh, but combining that private database with that engine provides you the unique and tailored outputs that you need.
So the longer you use it, the better it's gonna get as far as understanding your technology, your solution. That's great, and it's something, I mean, for anyone that's used ChatGPT, I mean, you log out of it, it forgets what you put in there, after the, unless there's a way to use it that I don't know about, but, it kind of builds off what you put in there, and then it forgets it. So something like this where you could be using it along, a lot of the time, that you're not starting from scratch, at the beginning, that's really good. Okay, so we covered some of the things that it can help with, right? So it can help with RFP responses. Does it help with RFQ responses, which are
A little bit briefer. Yeah, so the things that I've used it for a lot, and the diversity of ways to respond to government requirements are so varied that it's hard to
yeah,
cover all the bases. RFIs are really great to respond to, right? The sections are pretty straightforward. Um, Sources sought are pretty straightforward to respond to. It's really
mhm,
good for SBIRs, right? Fairly consistent, structured. RFPs, great for responding to. The There's a lot of value for those who are on um, uh, IDIQs like STARS 3, where
mhm,
there's task orders, task order RFQs that come out very quickly, right? They have like a 2-week turnaround,
right.
and they come out very frequently. Vets 2 is similar way. It's incredibly powerful for those because you can again increase your potential opportunity space, and they come out so quickly that the way I look at it is your go no go threshold can go down by almost 50%, and you can just be way more active and reactive off of those quick turn responses.
Yeah.
So those are, and we are, I'll be candid, we are building out the capacity of the platform. So, and looking at larger problems like, the big 100-page proposals that you have to write.
Right.
and how we structure the platform to be as powerful for that as it is for the smaller responses. But
Hmm.
particularly for small businesses that are trying to take shots on goal, it's great for all those use cases.
Interesting. So for a SIBR, like for instance, usually got to include some type of commercialization plan if I'm writing a SIBR proposal, right? So that's something that this could handle in there. Is that because I'm giving it a structure that maybe the SIBR gave me, or is it going to know intuitively what a commercialization plan is supposed to look like?
I would say the commercialization plan that I've generated out of it are relatively generic,
Hmm.
um, because they're so tailored to the
Yeah.
actual thing you're proposing. The nice thing that I do is like I've saved a lot of my previous commercialization plan segments in
Hmm.
as snippets. So I'll pull those things out and I can tailor, and the types of things we bid on are relatively similar in
Hmm.
commodity area, I would say.
Right.
We do a lot of AI, we do a lot of, modular systems architectures. So I can take that snippet off the shelf. I can and in the flow of the writing process, I can tailor that. In many cases, I can tailor that in the chat. I can say, "Hey, rewrite this section for insert the technology I'm working on today," and it'll rewrite it in flow, and I can just drop into the document.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, you're right. There are so many different types of RFPs, RFQs, sources. So even amongst like just SIBRs, right? You have different structures among some of the different SIBRs, STTRs. You've got a few different areas there. And we could probably talk about all the different types of things that we could respond to. But let's kind of pivot to, hey, I'm a small business now. I'm listening to this. I want to start using this. How is this going to cost me what it costs to, hire a full-time proposal writer or, hire someone on Upwork? What's what kind of programs do you have? What does the pricing look like? If you want to discuss that, how do I get started?
Yeah, no, great question. So our pricing is very clear and upfront. I personally have a bone with the folks who are like, "Oh yeah, use our tool, but call us so we can tell you how much it's going to cost you." I really despise that. So the pricing is very clear, and it's on the website. There's a 7-day $20 trial. So if you want to get in there, take a look at it. All of our new users have to go through a 15-minute onboarding, so we get you straight onto the platform immediately. And then after your 7-day trial, if you make less than 17 million in annual revenue, so if you're below the small business cap for the 541990 NAICS,
Hmm.
it is $500 a month or 5K
Okay.
a year, right? So pretty straightforward pricing. If you pay by the year, you save 10%. If you're above that NAICS code cap, it's $1,000 a month or $10,000 a year, and that's for 5 seats. In either case, if you go above 5 seats, it's a standard prorated, per seat cost off of
Okay.
those two structures. So it's $100 a seat or $200 a seat for every additional.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that it's really good pricing. Yeah, if you've anyone that's out there that's had to pay someone to write a proposal for them, or granted, you still need to be involved with the process, but you need to be involved in the process anyway, even if you hire somebody to write you're not just handing it over to somebody and them generating it for you unless they've been working for your business for a long time. But I mean, so you could, I mean, I've seen some companies pay in excess of 25 grand to have a proposal written, a big proposal. So, when we're talking, $500 a month, $1,000 a month, that's not bad. That's not bad. Now, so for the company that's just getting started, they may not have that yet, right? But I could say I haven't used it yet, and I plan on digging my hands in here, especially after the conversation. But I think that this is something that could save them a lot of time, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to what you might have to pay somebody to help you out.
Yeah, if you've paid any kind of consultant, whether it's a proposal manager or proposal writer, and we're not trying to threaten those folks' jobs, I think it will have an immense amount of value for those folks as professionals,
Oh,
right? If they can do more work faster, if they can produce faster, it's amazing. But yeah, like I can speak from a small business perspective, right? One, we've got monthly pricing, so if you use it for a month and you can't afford it anymore, there's no risk, drop out, right? It's fine. you don't necessarily have to sign up for a year. And I like that. Like I, as a small business owner, I don't like getting locked into 3-year contracts on stuff
Yeah.
because I don't know what next year is going to look like. And I don't want to be contractually obligated to that fee. So that's why we really did set up the pricing structure to make it approachable, achievable for small businesses. And you're absolutely right. If you think about it in just dollars and cents per hour, how much is an hour of one of your people's time's worth, right? In either the number of things you can go after if you're trying to multiply your opportunity space, or like how valuable that person's time is for the kind of nug work that they're having to grind through to just get a proposal off the ground. $500 a month is like 3 hours of someone's time in this market. 3
Yeah.
hours. Imagine what you've spent 3 hours on today, and that's a
Sure.
month on the platform.
And if you're hiring a high-end consultant, speaking as a high-end consultant in this field, I can tell you that some of us won't even charge by the hour because it's actually going to be a lot more than that, right?
Yep.
I tell people I'm not a proposal writer, but this could help me enable and help my clients, right, and get them going in the right direction. So no, this has really been great. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get into this. I'll do another episode. If you want to join me, you can, after I've used it myself for a little while. And so I can give everyone my feedback. I just want to be upfront that I haven't actually had to use it yet, but it was so innovative, and it really caught my attention when I saw it, that I want to get you on and hear your story and hear about the capabilities. So before we end, I do have one more question. Is there any, I know it's new, so there you might not yet, but has this generated any winning proposals yet for anybody for you or anybody that you know?
We actually, I can't say, we wrote a phase 1 proposal with this, and we did win. So
Okay, excellent.
I can say that it has been successful. And up until now, I didn't have that win rate data, but
Sure.
yeah, we did a phase 1 slate of cyber topics, I think, at the beginning of this year for DoD, and we won half of them. So
Oh,
it does
awesome.
work.
Congratulations. And I mean, and for anyone listening, that is highly dependent on your business and the technology you have, and
100%.
what you plug into the system is, I can imagine is going to be what it generates for you, right? Maybe just at a little bit more polished scale. So no, this has been great. John, thanks for coming on. Is there any last words you have for anyone out there that's thinking about this or selling to the government? Any advice you want to give before we end the podcast today?
No, I think, from an industry perspective, the government writ large is looking for more small businesses to get in the game, right? You can look at the news stories. The number of small businesses is going down that's participating in the market. I hear from government folks all the time. They are legitimately worried about it, but there aren't a whole lot of levers they can turn to solve that problem. And that's, again, from an ethos perspective, that's one of the motivating factors for us here is we really do want to enable those small businesses and make it easier for them to get into the market. So anything we can do, we're very customer focused. So any feedback you give us is 100% incorporated. We take into account with all of our feature and development decision making. So please, if you're interested in the platform, reach out to us, try it out. And let us know how it works for you. If there's any pain points you run into, we are 100% interested in hearing about those things so we can make it better.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, very cool. Thank you for coming on again. I'm on the website now. It's userogue.com. I will put your contact information also in the show notes and a link to the website so people can check it out for themselves. John Ferry, and thanks for coming on again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care now.
Cheers.
Well, hey guys, that was our episode with John Ferry. I know for me, I'm really looking forward to checking out Use Rogue and seeing how that can help me with our clients. And speaking of which, if you're a small business and you're trying to sell to the government, if you have a innovative technological solution or you're a more traditional contractor providing services, check out dodcontract.com. We have a variety of ways that we help our clients, whether it is as simple as getting a course or paying as a traditional consultant. We also, with select companies, will offer help for equity. So we do have some equity deals as well that we can potentially qualify you for and help you start winning those government contracts. So head over to DoDContract.com. You also may have noticed that we had some new music this week that was produced by Anwar Johnson. He's a really great longtime friend of mine since we were kids, and he's doing great with his music. And so that's on there. You can check him out on iTunes. And finally, check out Govly. If you're looking for opportunities to bid on, maybe you're going to use Rogue to help you write some of the proposals. But what Govly will help you do is find opportunities that aren't appearing on SAM.gov. These are the opportunities that are going to come out on GSA, opportunities coming out on some of the big government-wide contract vehicles that I discussed a little bit with John on the podcast. So look, you can get into Govly and actually get a pretty significant discount if you mention that you heard it on DoDContract.com. It's a great way, especially if your approach to government contracts is as a subcontractor. And there are a lot of companies that do take that approach. In fact, a lot of the bigs are doing both priming and subbing, just depending on the deal. So check that out. Thanks again for listening, and I'll check you out next week.